Thanks, Kara.
You're welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I will now call the hearing to order. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. This morning, I will be chairing the hearing. My name is Robert Hutchings. On my direct left is Mr. Thériault. My far left is Mr. Buss, representing the Assessment and Taxation Department. This morning, we have Mr. Taylor, and our secretary today is Ms. Belshaw. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in or affirmed. Be advised that comparison of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by this Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed further to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed values or classification, or to Court of Queen's Bench if the matters pertain to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following their swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by cross-examination by the applicant, and then the applicant's testimony, followed by cross-examination by the assessor and the panel members. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applicants have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions based on evidence presented here today. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. And please, out of courtesy, can everybody please make sure their cell phones are in complete silence before we begin. Okay, Kara, could you swear in the assessor, please?
Yeah, okay. Please state your name.
Mike Taylor.
Do you swear the evidence you'll present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
And the applicants who will be speaking, please.
Will you all be speaking? Will you all swear in or affirm?
Yeah.
Yep. Please state your name.
Sandy Shivelman.
Do you swear the evidence you'll present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Swear.
Okay, please state your name.
Justin Zarnowski.
Do you swear the evidence you'll present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name.
Diane Shivelman.
Do you swear the evidence you'll present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Mark Newman.
Do you swear the evidence you'll present today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Our first property, I guess, is 875 St. James Street, and we've got 2 years of a realty appeal for 2018, 2019. It looks like for 2018, there was a supplementary assessment issued effective October 1st through to December 31st, and then 2019 reflecting the changes that were as a result of that supplementary assessment being issued in 2018. Seeing as these are separate appeals, we will deal with them separately if you want to just apply your arguments for 2019, but for the record, we'll deal with them separately, okay? Okay, Mr. Taylor, when you are ready, I will start with 2018-875 St. James Street, file number 19-5.
Do you want the roll number or anything like that?
Yes, please.
So the roll number is 13-096-195-800, 875 St. James Street. Number company owns it. The assessed value we're looking at today is $31,707,000. Built in 2013 with an addition built in 2018. Not much else to really touch on there on page 1. Basically what we have is the former Target site on St. James that's since been broken down into 3 different tenancies or CRUs. So rental comparables on page 2. They vary in size from 27,900 975 square feet up to 47,847 square feet. Tried to stay in the subject area on St. James Street, Empress, Ellis Avenue. They all range in square footage, like I said before, and the net rent per square foot ranges from $12 up to $20 a square foot. So you can see on page 3, we have the three separate spaces here, 2 of which have had a model-driven rent applied at $17.42, and the other one at $17.19 a square foot. For the Winners Home Sense occupancy and the 24/7 in touch. I don't think that the square footages are correct, so we didn't receive any income expense questionnaires on this property yet when we issued supplementary, so I'm sure those can be updated with time. And then the vacant units, the one you see on top, this is 45,000 square feet, and was just given an override rent of $10 a square foot. And then below the income valuation is standard for what we would apply to retail warehouse property, with a vacancy collection loss of 2%, shortfall of $5.50 a square foot, and a cap rate of 6.5%. Page 4 is just the standard City of Winnipeg Assessment Department stance on capitalization rates. Skipping over to page 6. Here you see some photos of the subject property here. Let you guys catch up. So essentially we have the 24/7 in touch, which is on the east side of the building, closer to Empress, whereas the Winners Home Sense is on the side facing St. James Street. So we just have some pages that, or sorry, some photos there showing the pad site development, so there'll be another supplementary when that's done, I guess. Page 8 just shows some of the 24/7 in touch interior photographs, just of the call center there and the lobby. There's stairway and elevator access for that one. More pictures of the pad site and the loading dock at the back on page 9. Page 10 just shows the entrance way for the Winners Home Sense space, so it has an escalator and a set of stairs in addition to the elevators too. And then page 11 just has some interior photos of the Winners Home Sense space, the store there. Next couple pages are just the permits. I mean, this property has been redeveloped since initially constructed for Target. So now with the 3 different units, that's why we issued the supplemental. Based on basically having those 3 smaller units rather than 1 large unit. In the back, just kind of leasing brochure I found off the Shindig website. They put lots of color and pictures and all their advertisements, so it's just there for information purposes. That's my presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Did the applicants have any questions of the assessor's evidence?
We will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so we're clear, for 2018, the assessment, the supplementary is issued pursuant to section 341, correct?
Correct.
And it was issued on, the statement is dated January 15, 2019, correct?
I don't have the statement in front of me, but I'll take your word for it.
All right. Are you aware that the City of Winnipeg Assessment Department is taking the position that a section 341 supplementary assessment can only be issued in relation to the year in which it is issued? In other words, it cannot apply retroactively?
341, sorry, I don't have the act in front of me here, but I guess it's a 14.2 would be applicable to the other section.
So, as I understand what happened here is a 14.2 was issued for 2019.
Again, yeah, that sounds.
And I can give you the documents.
Sure.
And a 341 was issued for, and a 341 was issued for 2018. You can look at the documents. January 15 of 19, 341 issues to create the supplementary assessment for 2018, correct? And for 2019, a 14-2 is issued.
Correct.
Okay, so that's what happened factually. My question to you is, are you aware that the city of Winnipeg is taking the position in the Manitoba Court of Appeal that section 341 cannot be used to go back retroactively?
I'm not totally familiar with what they're doing
Okay.
at the court.
And Mr. Chairman, I simply want to indicate for the record that this is a position the city of Winnipeg is taking in the context of an appeal now pending in the Manitoba Court of Appeal in relation to a property where an owner sought an exemption, and the city has in their factum presented in the Manitoba Court of Appeal advised the court that in their view, section 340, which is the refund section, and section 341, which is the supplementary taxation section, cannot be used retroactively. I simply say that to you so that it will be understood that our submissions to you here today, and we're going to focus on value, are without prejudice to our right to raise this position that the 2018 supplementary, as it has been issued, based on the position the city is taking in the Court of Appeal, cannot be properly issued the way they have done it. Okay? So I just wanted that on the record.
All right, thank you.
All right. So, Mr. Taylor, we agree your task is to determine what a willing buyer would pay to a willing seller for the subject property at April 1 of 2016.
Correct. And
We agree that the 2018 reassessment took effect October 1 of 2018.
Sorry, Mark, just to go back, like, in your application for appeal, were you talking about any of this other, like, you're basically talking about liability taxation and your little spiel you gave there about 14, 2, and 2?
Yeah, it's not about liability to taxation, it's about
Okay.
whether the department, based on what it is saying in the Manitoba Court of Appeal, had the jurisdiction to do what it's doing. It's
Is
not
that really a point we'll be talking about here?
No.
Is my question.
We're not going to. I've
Okay, now you're
raised
supposed to be
it.
asking questions about my brief, not about all this
No, I'm
other
going to
stuff.
ask about your brief.
Great.
Okay. So the supplementary assessment takes effect October 1 of 2018, correct?
Yep.
And prior to that date, from the date of construction of the property, which I believe it opened sometime in the latter half of 2013, is that your understanding?
For the Target store?
Yes.
I believe so, yeah.
And by early April of 2015, it was closed, correct?
I'm not sure exactly
Okay.
dates. I mean, I'm here to defend the value on how it's physically set up now, not as Target.
So you use the word that there was an addition in 2018,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
Um,
You can see that on page 13.
And by that, are you referencing the, so this is a copy of a permit, correct?
Yep.
Um, So, page 13 is a permit, and there is some typewriting down along the left-hand margin, permit for addition to former Target building. See that typewriting?
Yep. I added that in, yep.
You put that in, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, that's not part of the permit as it issues.
Nope.
And this additional space that you're describing, this is not leasable area, is it?
Nope.
No, it created a vestibule, correct? Okay. And the vestibule was necessary to facilitate,
The building being set up into a multi-tenant
Right.
property.
because until that point in time, the building had been configured as a single-tenant occupant, correct? And so what happened is, I think you're generally aware that attempts were made to lease the property, and that was unsuccessful, and it was reconfigured into a
Yeah.
multi-tenant scenario.
Yep.
Okay. But What you must do is take the physical property as it exists today effectively and put it into the economic conditions of April 1 of 2016, correct?
Yep.
And in April 1 of 2016, the building was vacant.
The market conditions as of April 1, 2016, not the physical condition.
No, I said that you take the physical property as it exists today
Yep.
and you put it into the market conditions of April 1 of 16.
Yep,
And at April 1 of 16, the building was vacant.
was.
Indeed, when the permit was taken out in 2017, the building continued to be vacant.
Yep.
So the end result of this addition, as you called it, was that no additional leasable area was created, agreed?
Agreed.
And you're aware that the original assessment as it issued for 2018 was $22,979,000?
Yep.
And are you aware as well that that calculation as done by the assessment department used a 25% vacancy?
Yep.
Subsequently, the assessor at the hearing recommended a reduction to $16,862,000.
I can't speak to their recommendation.
You haven't seen a copy of it?
I have, yeah. It's not my recommendation.
I understand. I'm simply asking you that whether you are aware that
I'm
that
aware, yeah.
recommendation was made. All right. And you're aware as well that ultimately the board fixed a value of $10,477,000. Or $10,447,000, correct?
Makes sense.
All right. And today, you're suggesting the value should be $31,707,000.
Yep.
So let's talk about the market conditions at April 1 of 2016. By that date, 4 Target stores in Winnipeg, approximating almost 500,000 square feet, had closed.
Correct.
By then, Sears had announced a downsizing of its number of stores.
That was just in the States.
In Canada as well.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't have any printouts. I'm sure one of your other people can tag in and.
At the same time, the RWC classification that you're using here, that is traditionally a big box type of store.
That is for big box stores, I guess. It's more just stores that have the, I guess, the components that a warehouse would have to facilitate the higher turnaround on product. So overhead doors that could turn product around would be a retail warehouse. So you see that in some smaller stores, you see some of that in bigger stores. Yeah, it's really just what they need in terms of loading product in and getting it out quickly.
Okay. So for example, there were a number of future shops across the city. They all closed, didn't they?
Yep.
The merger of Safeways and Sobeys had happened by then, and a number of those stores closed, correct?
Yeah, I think there's just one that closed.
Mr. Newman, you
Yes.
know, Mr. Taylor never presented any of this evidence, so
Right.
you're bordering on presenting evidence here rather than questioning him on some of your questions.
Well, my difficulty is, he's coming here telling us what the market is at April 1 of 16. And so I need the ability to examine him on what the market conditions were at April 1 of 16, because that speaks to the validity of his comparables.
Well, maybe I question him on his comparables directly, but presenting evidence on, I understand where you're going, but we're going a little bit, we're getting close to presenting evidence here, okay?
Okay, so let me ask just 2 more questions in this area, and then I will move on. Office Depot, number of them closed?
Yep.
Pet Cetera, number of them closed?
Sure.
Okay. What these stores have in common is that typically they are in the range of 30, 40, potentially as high as 50,000 square feet, correct? And that is the size that you're using for your comparables.
Right.
Do you consider this property comparable to Polo Park or St. Vital Shopping Center?
It's not a major mall, no.
Okay. And do we agree that Polo Park and St. Vital Shopping Center would be classified as regional malls?
Correct.
In your brief, you pointed us to the photo at page 9, in the lower half of the page. And you indicated that photo shows the loading ramp.
Yep.
And that loading ramp, let me rephrase, that shows the loading doors, it's the loading dock, and that loading dock is up a ramp, correct?
Yes.
Because that loading dock is at the second level
Yep.
of this property.
Yep. And it's common area.
So, this property, all of your comparables, I gather, are properties who are at grade.
Yep.
The access for the customers is at grade.
Yep.
The loading docks are at grade.
Yep.
Everything is at grade. Are you aware of any other retail property in the city of Winnipeg that is not part of an enclosed shopping mall, that is at the second floor, is up a level?
I believe that, which one is it? They have covered parking. There's the Superstore on Forge Avenue.
But that parking is underneath. Parking is below grade.
That's right.
So the store itself
Yeah.
is at grade.
That's correct.
So would you agree with me then that you're not aware of any other retail store, except in an enclosed shopping mall, so I'm excluding that, where the store, the retail space is at a second level?
Not really. There's the IKEA store, and their showroom upstairs, and their kitchen and all that stuff they have up there, but I mean, yeah, it's not common.
Right. And similarly, all of these other retail stores will have their loading docks at grade level. Ease of movement of merchandise in and out, as you made reference to earlier.
Yep.
And none of your comparables require customers to use the stairs or an elevator or an escalator to get up to the retail space.
I don't believe so.
Now, in terms of the value calculation that is found on page 3 of the brief, you indicated that two of the rents, the $17.42 rent and the $17.19 rent, are model driven.
That's correct.
And the $10 rent for the 45,000 square feet was an override.
That's right.
Okay. Why was it overridden?
And that's what the assessor who issued the supplemental put it at, because it's vacant. There's
So-
no tenant finishes in the space.
So, the $17.42 and the $17.19, as you've indicated, those are generated by the model.
Yep.
Similarly, the 2% vacancy is generated by the model. Is everything on this page generated by the model?
Well, yeah, in simple terms, yes.
Yes. So the shortfall of $5.50 and the capitalization rate of 6.5% generated by the model. And the model will not be set up to take into account the historic vacancy of this property, correct?
No, the model won't look at that.
And there was no override done to take into account the historic vacancy of this property, agreed?
Nope.
So let's look at your comparables then on page 2 of your brief.
Right.
Just so I understand, you're showing two comparables for 947 St. James. The bottom one on the page,
Yep,
and then the one that is the fourth one from the top.
correct.
Are these the same premises or different premises?
They are, but they built an atrium and then renegotiated their lease in 14.
So it's the same space? And who is this tenant?
Staples.
Staples. So the lease that they negotiated in October of 2014, the rent went down by 94 cents a square foot.
Yeah, as part of, I guess, how they paid for the renovation in addition to the building, and then obviously the economies of scale of being a little bigger now.
The 1450 Ellis Avenue, 47,847 square feet, $15 a square foot, February 1 of 2015. That's the Sears Home Furniture Store.
Correct.
And you'd agree with me that that rent is the one that is closest in time to the reference date?
Yep.
And you'd agree with me as well that the square footage of that space is closest in size to the 3 spaces you're valuing on page 3.
Right.
A number of the other comparables that you've referenced, so for example, the second one from the bottom, 600 Empress Street, 140. Is that Bed Bath and Beyond?
Yep.
And that's 28,000 square feet, just over.
Yep.
So that is, in terms of the largest of the spaces in the subject property, it is approximately 50% of the size.
Yes.
And you're familiar with the concept of economies of scale,
Yep.
and you understand that as space gets bigger, typically the rent per square foot gets smaller.
Typically, yeah.
Okay.
That doesn't really follow that rule in the comparables I've laid out here, though.
Well, it does for 947 St. James, doesn't it? Where it went down from $16.73
Yep.
to $15.79. And then your next largest comparable is the 947 St. James, the fourth one down, the October 1, 2014 lease. And again, that would be Staples. And that one is smaller than all of the units you're now valuing. But it is the only other of your comparables that starts with a 4.
Sure.
All of the other comparables are less than 40,000 square feet,
Yep.
and there are 3 of them that are less than 30,000 square feet.
Yep.
All of these comparables are at grade, correct?
Correct.
None of them require the consumer to go up an escalator or elevator or stairs to get to the shopping area, agreed?
Agreed.
All of them have their loading dock areas at grade, agreed?
Agreed.
And so in every respect, all of the comparables are what I would call typical retail space.
Yes.
The subject is not, is it?
No, but none of these also have covered parking like the subject, so arguments can be made either way.
$1450 Ellis, the Sears Home Store is at the corner of Ellis and St. James,
Correct.
so it is visible to traffic coming from both directions.
Yep.
On both those streets. Would you agree with me that it is the most visible of the comparables for that reason?
They're all right in the same area as the subject property, so.
I understand, they're all on St. James or they're all on
Yeah.
Empress, but my point is that 1450 Ellis is the only one located on a corner.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Best Buy isn't too far off the corner of St. Matthews and St. James.
Now, let's just talk about Best Buy for a moment. So this shopping complex that Best Buy is located in, that is the same complex that a Future Shop was located in.
Yep.
And the Future Shop closed in that complex, correct?
Correct.
Because Future Shop and Best Buy consolidated their operations, correct? And so this lease renewal was done in the context of a consolidation of the operations, agreed?
Agreed.
And for that reason, that tenant was prepared to pay a higher rent because effectively, the ownership was cutting their square footage in half.
I think that's speculative on your part.
So you don't agree?
I don't agree.
Okay. The comparable at the second one from the bottom, Unit 140, 600 Empress, Bed Bath and Beyond. What, if anything, do you know about the level of improvements that were included in the lease?
I don't have copies of the lease.
So you don't know anything?
Generally not, owners don't really provide the leases to the city.
If I told you that in the context of this space, the landlord provided what is called turnkey space, in other words.
I would say if you're providing evidence on what the lease contains, you should provide the lease.
Well, we will get to our evidence. My question for you is, because you're the one who's used the comparable, you
Yep.
selected it. My question to you is simply, are you aware that the rent includes turnkey space? Okay. Similarly, are you aware that 600 Empress in the middle of the list of comparables, Suite 110, that's Marshall's, agreed?
Yep.
And it is in the same complex as Bed Bath and Beyond?
Yep.
And are you aware that that space as well was turnkey space?
And I don't have the leases, so unless you're gonna give them over, I can't comment on it.
So, the comparables, are they selected by the model as well?
No,
They're individually selected?
I selected all the comparables.
Okay. But the rent is model selected rent.
Right.
So no adjustments have been made to the rents to take into account the second floor nature of the subject property?
Nope.
No adjustments have been made to take into account the fact that loading docks are not at grade? Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. So let's talk about vacancy, 2%. Again, selected by the model?
Yes, in simple terms again.
So when I asked you earlier about Future Shop and Pet Cetera and the closure of various stores of that type, is the model taking into account the fact that there is a trend for these big box stores to be closing?
You want to ask me what again?
I want to
Is the
ask you
model taking into account that?
the closure of these big box type of stores.
So the big box stores often close, Mark, and then often someone moves into the space also. You commented on lots of different stores and places that have gone vacant and have been occupied post-reference. So I'm really not sure what you're asking. The model doesn't take into account the site-specific nature of this property and what it's at.
The vacancy of 2%,
Mhm.
that is the same vacancy that's assigned to Polo Park and St. Vital shopping centers, correct?
No.
No?
Those are regional shopping centers, this is a retail warehouse. So big box retail, think of it that way.
Just so we're clear on my question.
Yep.
The vacancy that is applied to St. Vital Shopping Center and Polo Park, is it 2%?
No, I don't know why you're asking me on those properties and we're talking about this one.
Because I'm trying to establish the reasonableness of the vacancy.
Okay.
And my point simply is that if St. Vital Mall and Polo Park, which you would agree, I assume, are the best regional malls in this city,
Yep.
if they get a 2% vacancy, and if this property is not as good as those, shouldn't it get
Mr.
higher?
Newman, Mr. Taylor never presented regional malls and we're dealing with this specific property.
Again, Mr. Chairman, what we're dealing with is the comparability of his selected vacancy, but that's fine. We'll submit that evidence in rebuttal.
Thank you.
And I take it you would agree with me that the vacancy of 2% selected by the model also would not take into account the entry of near to 500,000 square feet into the marketplace previously occupied by Target?
So you're talking about new inventory beyond this?
Yes.
This is the Target inventory. you're talking
Well, this is one of the Target stores. There were 3 others,
Yep,
totaling approximately 500,000 square feet,
yep,
all vacant at April 1 of 16.
yep.
So my point is, the model at 2% does not take that into account. Agreed?
That's not completely accurate, no. I would not agree.
You would not agree?
No.
I see. Did you build the model?
No.
Do you know what went into the model?
Yep.
Are you telling us the Target stores were part of the model at 2%?
It's not as simple as the yes or no answer.
The shortfall, $5.50 a square foot,
Yep,
all based on stores at grade.
yep.
None of them have escalators or elevators to upper levels.
Again, we've talked about IKEA, we've talked about some other furniture stores that have second floor spaces. Most of them are at grade, yes.
Okay. You would agree with me that elevators, escalators bring increased maintenance costs?
Yep.
This property, you talked about the covered parking earlier. The covered parking area is, it's lighted, there's lighting,
Mhm.
and it's on 24 hours a day.
Yes, yep.
So all of that will lead to increased cost, agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Capitalization rate. Again, that's the model for this type of property.
Simply put, yeah.
So let's look at your page 4. This is the chart of capitalization rates that the city presents as part of its 2018 assessment appeals, correct?
Correct.
And it presents it on all types of property, correct?
Most of them, yeah.
Okay. And of course, the section we would be dealing with is the middle section in the table called retail.
Yeah, subject property, again, if you flip back to page 3,
Yeah.
it's being labeled as a retail warehouse, RWC, which is not in the table on page 4.
So we have to figure out where it would fit on the table, don't we?
You can try to figure it out.
Okay. So it's not a regional shopping center. I think we agree on that. It's not a strip mall. Agreed?
It's none of these.
It's none of these. But it's closest to a power center, isn't it?
Well, Power Center are built up with a lot more stores than just the one we have here, or one building. Right?
Well, I guess it depends on the configuration.
This isn't a Power Center.
No, it's not. So what is it?
It's not a Power Center yet. Based on the development plan that you guys have put forward, it would eventually be something like a Power Center.
Okay.
But that's not what I'm looking at today. I'm looking at it as a region or a retail warehouse.
So is this table then really irrelevant to this, to this appeal?
Is the table irrelevant?
Yes.
I guess so. Retail warehouse isn't included in here.
But is a retail warehouse not closest in its nature to a power center?
Again, it depends on the property.
Well, you're now bringing this property forward as a multi-tenant property. You're not bringing it forward as single tenant anymore.
No.
So if you're bringing it forward as a multi-tenant property, power center by its nature consists typically of a number of big box retailers, agreed?
Yeah, over a certain size, generally, yeah. And this
And-
hasn't hit that size threshold yet,
What's the,
in my opinion.
what's the size threshold for a power center?
Usually it's closer to 400, 500,000 square feet. Not close to that yet. Multiple buildings. In my experience, in my opinion.
Okay. So the capitalization rate again of 6.5% selected by the model will be for properties that are at grade.
Yep.
It won't be for properties of this type.
Nope.
It won't be for properties that have had chronic vacancy, agreed?
Generally not, no.
So should an adjustment have been made to the capitalization rate to take into account the fact that it's not at grade?
Potentially, yeah.
And should an adjustment have been made to the capitalization rate to take into account the fact that this property has suffered from chronic vacancy?
Sure.
Because, and I appreciate your candor, Mr. Taylor, I mean that sincerely, because at the end of the day, an investor looking to buy this property, capitalization rate, return of investment, return on investment, looking at this property with its configuration, second floor, loading docks up, a ramp, chronic vacancy, they're not going to treat it the same as other more typical properties of the same type.
Nope.
And they would pay only with a higher capitalization rate to account for that risk.
Likely, yes.
All right. And this model-generated value does not take that into account, agreed?
Agreed.
And there should be an adjustment for that, agreed?
Yep.
Okay. And if I were to suggest to you the adjustment should take it to 8%, would you agree?
No.
But you agree there should be an adjustment?
Yes.
I may have just a moment.
No problem.
Yeah, because when we, wow, more than one, since he wants you guys.
These are green superstars. Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Any other parties have any questions at all of the assessor? Okay. Mr. Buss, any questions of the assessor?
Yes, I have a couple. So this was originally built in 2013, is that
Yep.
correct? And then Target had the entire building,
Yep.
and Target moved out in 2015.
I think it was earlier than that.
Pardon me?
I'm not sure the date.
No. I think it was said earlier, somewhere in 2015.
Yeah, it wasn't in my evidence, so.
So was the building completely vacant in 2000 when Target left?
Yep.
When did the Winners and HomeSense come in?
2018.
And the In Touch?
Same thing, 2018.
So the building was sitting empty from sometime in 15 to
Yep.
18. And is there a permit in your brief here for work that's being done now?
Yep.
Which page is that?
I believe it's page 12 is the permit for the pad site development they're doing now.
Okay.
And that's what you can see on page, I guess, 9, is the pad site development right across the street from 24/7 In Touch. So they're putting in a restaurant there.
Okay, and the cap rate, I think you answered that you thought the cap rate should be adjusted. You know,
Yep.
have you got an opinion as to what it should be adjusted to?
I'm not gonna present that today.
That's all my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Buss. Mr. Carrion, any questions?
No, I just have one. Your overridden space there,
Yep.
$10. What's in there now?
It's just vacant right now.
Still vacant? And you've applied a $10 rate to that vacant space?
That was what was applied for the supplemental, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's where I was having a bit of a hard time to try to reconcile with the vacancy and the rate, so
Yeah.
I guess that's the purpose of my question. I know Mr. Newman has asked a lot of questions, so I'm not gonna go over them again. Okay, so that's still vacant, that 45,000?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Carrion. Mr. Taylor, I'm gonna start with page 3. And I've divided the premise IDs into number 1, number 2, and number 3,
Okay.
descending. So number 1 is the vacant space. Is that on the second floor?
They're all on the
Third?
second floor.
They're on the second floor. Number 2, that would be Winners or the call center?
Winners.
Winners, okay. And number 3 would be the call center.
And again, our square footages, I don't think match up with the appellant's square
Okay.
footages.
Okay.
Again, because we didn't have the rental information at the time of supplemental.
Yeah, okay. And these were occupied in the fall of 2018, and you made it effective October 1st?
I believe one of them was occupied before, but the other one began occupancy October 1st, so we put October 1st.
Okay, for both of them, or
Yeah.
for the whole space,
The
yeah.
whole.
Okay, so the Winners, I'll call it unit number 2, is assessed at 1742 for about 48,000 square feet approximately.
Yep.
If we look on your page 2, the comparables, and going halfway down is the comps, the 600 Empress Street, unit number 110, that's a Marshalls, that would be the same company as Winners, is that
Yep.
correct? Okay, and they're located basically around the corner.
Yep.
On the north side
West side, yeah.
of the covered parking in the theater there, okay. So that's $20 a square foot for about half. Okay, and the call center, 1719 for about approximately 58,000 square feet. Now, any lease information, do you have any, do you know what they're leased at all?
Nope.
Okay, all right. And regarding the path, I know it's future, this, assigned to this roll number is the 348,227 square feet. Does that include the pad sites? Are those all assessed under one roll, that whole square, that whole block there?
Wait, sorry, can you repeat that question?
The land area assigned to this roll number is 348,000 square feet approximately. Now, we've got that, basically that vacant block there.
Yeah, no, it's not all on this roll number.
Okay, like there's a PF change there, I believe, going up there, and,
Yeah, like if you flip to page 6, Mr. Chairman, so it shows the subject on the corner of St. Matthews and St. James.
okay,
So really, it's just the part that's paved is the subject property.
so it's just the building, so the development, and it's post-reference anyway, has no, it's on different roll numbers.
Well, no, the development that's gonna be situated on, is on the roll number.
It is, okay.
Yeah, like I can do a little doodle in here. It's basically going right here, so it's on the subject roll number.
Oh, it is,
So,
that is
yeah.
all the roll number, okay.
Yeah,
No, excuse me, a part of the parking lot is going
Yeah.
on?
Yeah, so page 6, we've got a site map. Would it be fair to include all those, they look like parking spaces as part of the roll number?
yeah, that's part of the roll number.
Okay, that whole, I'm gonna draw it out and then, so I'm
Yeah.
saying that's the roll
Yeah,
number?
everything that's paved
That's
is
the roll number,
yeah.
including, yeah, is that
Yeah.
fair? Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Okay. any idea, any information on what the lease rate is being asked for on the vacant area?
I don't know what the asking rates are, that'll be post-reference information anyways.
Okay.
Similarly to what the actual rents are.
So the assessor never documented what was being asked for during the inspection and the supplementary assessment?
They might have. I didn't put that in my information today again, post-reference information.
All right. Okay.
If I put that in, usually you guys can take it out.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's all my questions. Okay. Mr. Newman, or applicants, any questions arising or?
No, I don't think we have any questions arising, so let's just address procedurally how we want to deal with our rebuttal.
Okay.
My inclination is to simply distribute it and present it at the same time as our main brief is presented, if
Okay.
that's acceptable.
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
And just to assist the panel, what we intend to do is, Mr. Schindelman is going to give evidence. He's going to work through the main brief that was filed, and as well with some references to the supplementary. And we'll try and make this as efficient as possible for the benefit of the panel.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Schindelman, just help us understand a very little bit about you. How old are you?
I'm 62,
And how long have you been in the real estate business?
since 1975, 44 years.
And you're a member of the CCIM, and just briefly, what is the CCIM?
CCIM, a senior instructor for the retail component, is a commercial investment member of, it was of the National Association of Realtors. I'm also the only CRE counselor of real estate in Manitoba, and the only SIOR completed that education as well.
And just so we understand, CCIM is an international organization?
Yes, we've put on courses in Russia and Korea and internationally, yes.
And I understand that you are active in the development of real estate throughout Manitoba?
Yes, and I also developed the curriculum for retail for CCIM.
Okay. Do you develop real estate in other places in Canada?
Yes,
Do you develop real estate in the United States
yes,
and other places in the world?
yes.
So let's just talk about the site just a little bit for a couple of moments. This site is the former Winnipeg Stadium site, correct?
Yes, it was where the former Winnipeg Stadium stood.
And the building that we're talking about today, as originally built, approximately 150,000 square feet.
Yes,
Who built it?
Target built it to their own specifications, which were not the specifications that we would use in this climate or this country.
And so, for example, if we look at page 1 of your brief,
Yes.
you make some comments there about the parking under the building not being structural. Would you just explain that to us?
It never dawned on us that they wouldn't put rebar or structure in the parking that was under the building. They in fact put no structure and no piling under the parking. And because it doesn't get any sunlight, the frost didn't come out of the ground at least for years. As well, they never got an occupancy permit. We weren't informed of that by the city, and so it could never actually be fully occupied, even by Target.
Now, let's just talk about Target for a moment. My understanding is that Target opened this location in the fall of 2013, is that correct?
Right, it was already a non-event.
And when you say it was a non-event, why do you say that?
It was known that their pricing was double what it was in the United States and that they didn't carry the same product. So it didn't create any buzz, any reason to locate near it, and any reason for customers to go to it. I have an example of someone in our employ who took a Friday off. They were going to Target shopping in Grand Forks. And I said, are you aware, Kaylee, that you gotta drive by 3 Targets to get out of town? Yes, but they don't have what we buy, and they don't have the pricing, and we're going to Grand Forks to Target.
So, as I understand it, Target went into insolvency proceedings in early January of 2015?
Right, it was rumored in the fall, but they didn't, when the new CEO came in, they went into receivership.
And by early April of 2015, was this store closed?
Yes,
Were all the other Target stores across Canada closed at the same time?
I believe so. Some earlier.
All right, and we talked with the assessor about his photo of the loading ramp and the loading docks up on the second level.
Right.
And as someone who is experienced in the development of real estate, is that something that is efficient and typically used?
No, they have to share loading docks when you make it multi-tenant. You create a bunch of unusable space, and not everyone is an experienced trucker today. There is problems loading onto the second floor.
So when the space went vacant, when Target closed,
Yes.
did you begin an extensive marketing campaign to try and lease the space?
Both Cadillac Fairview and ourselves, who have both teams of experienced relationships with retailers, immediately tried to see if it could be repurposed for Canadian Tire. That was the first one. And then for Walmart. Walmart had a bad experience in the Stockyards development in Toronto and would not consider a second floor. Canadian Tire had a bad experience as well, but we went and got engineers to see what we would have to do to get the floor load. We couldn't get the floor load for money. And so it became not feasible. We also went to Lowe's, who weren't in the market at that time, as well as Sale, the sporting goods from Montreal, and a myriad of other people, furniture stores. Everybody was no. Simon's, we offered it to Simon's for $8 a square foot.
And Simon's is a fashion retailer out of Quebec?
Yes.
All right. So exhaustive attempts are made to relet the space, and you're finding resistance both in terms of the floor capacities. What about the fact that it's at the second level, it's not at grade?
Yeah, 2 of the retailers that we talked to had tried a store on second level, unsuccessfully.
And everything you've just described to us is found on page 2 of your brief in terms of Lowe's and Cabela's and Walmart and those tenants, correct?
Right, yes it is.
Now, as a consequence, you then made a decision that you would attempt to reconfigure the space in the hope that that may make it more attractive in the marketplace?
We tried to mitigate. In hindsight, it should have been demolished. That's what I wanted, but we tried to mitigate. We just felt it was a waste for somebody to not try and utilize that, but the heroic sense that we went to was a mistake. And all the money that went into the building permits were to try and mitigate, we're trying to make something of nothing.
Okay. So if we look at page 4 and page 5 of your brief, these are maps
Yes, yes.
of the building, and the areas that are highlighted in sort of a pinky shaded color, those are areas that became not leasable because of?
Because of the subdivision, and because of fire exits, and because of loading.
So, let me ask you this. As someone who is experienced in the development of retail, do merchants want retail space that is at a second floor level that is not at grade?
Absolutely not. Mountain Equipment Co-op turned it down, London Drugs turned it down, the furniture store, EQ3 turned it down, and they wanted to put a flagship store in Winnipeg, and they turned it down. We work with Dufresne. Nobody's going on the second floor.
And why is it that merchants see it as not being advantageous space?
There's not gonna be cross-shopping for somebody who goes to one place to another, to go downstairs and back up. Retailers know their customers, and their customers don't like to go on the second floor. It's like personal storage. You're renting a locker, it's 10 by 10, but on the second floor you get less rent. And there's an elevator, and there's staircases, and there's lighting, but you get less rent.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit, please, about your comparables, which are found on page 7 of your brief.
Right. Yes.
So, and there are pictures of each of these comparables, correct?
Yes, yes there is. We have a picture of
And
every
they-
comparable that we mentioned.
Right. And first of all, were you able to locate any comparables for retail that are at a second level, ignoring enclosed shopping malls?
No, only the Zellers lease, there are none. Because on the main floor, you can put an extra exit in, you can put extra shipping, you can put loading. You have options you don't have on the second floor.
Okay. So, let's just look at your comparables briefly. So your first one is 1250 St. James.
Yes.
The brick,
Yes,
36,945 square feet, and that photo was found at the top half of page 8.
yes.
And why did you select this as a comparable?
It's on St. James Street. It's a high ceiling building. It was purpose-built for United Furniture, who the brick later acquired. And it's a direct comparable, only it's better. Because as it turns out, it was later subdivided, they took less space, and you punched a door in, and you punched a loading door in, and you were able to operate.
Okay. 1300 Ellis.
Right.
So at one time, that space was occupied by Cabela's, was it not?
Yes.
Okay.
It was occupied by Cabela's. They felt they would do more business in the Seasons area, which was coming on, and they relocated to that area, and Bianca and Moore took it over.
And so that's 50,000 square feet,
Yes,
and that compares quite similarly to,
on grade, loading, docks, all on grade, retail space, attractive retail space.
all right. The third one, 1300 Ellis, 84,331 square feet. That was at one time the original Cabela's location in Winnipeg, correct?
Yes, it was $7 a foot, because they had more square footage, and they had their call center back in there as well, and they paid $7 a square foot.
And that was the former Sidney I. Robinson space?
Yes.
All right. And then they relocated to 1300 Ellis. Your fourth comparable, 1000 St. James, so that picture is found in the lower half of page 9.
Yes,
And so that's a furniture store?
yes it is, and they paid $12 a foot, high ceilings, it's on the corner, and it's on grade. Everything is on grade. The people who buy furniture can take it out, and they can load furniture in. It's on grade.
Okay. So then you show the Grand Park Shopping Center, and you show it twice. So the first one, 116,573 square feet, and that's on page 10, the upper photo. So what is that one about?
That, the landlord took back the Zeller's lease and renovated it for Target, and they paid $6.25 a square foot while they were there.
Okay,
And then it was easily subdivided because it was on grade. And so, like ours, you couldn't put a 20,000 foot tenant in there. You couldn't create the openings for that. But they subdivided it, the Target store, and released it to new tenants. They put a gym in, they have Canadian Tire, they didn't have to take the full store, and they paid $7 a square foot.
and that opened June 23 of 16, but you're indicating the lease was negotiated in the 12 months prior to that?
Yes, it was a long negotiation, because we were negotiating with them to build them on Taylor Avenue at the same time.
All right.
The Canadian Tire as well needs automotive. They're a big automotive place. And that has to be on grade. We couldn't accommodate them on our Target site, but here's an example of them putting it in the Target at Grand Park Shopping Center at
And
$7.
you're the top photo of page 11.
Yes, sorry.
All right, so then, let's skip by the Polo Park, the acquisition of the Zeller's lease. 1250 Taylor, that's a call center for the Royal Bank,
Yes,
and that photo is the lower half of page 11.
right. That was purpose-built. It's got computer floor in most of the spaces. There's 2 trays of data cabling under the floor and 1 tray on the subfloor. It was custom-built for the Royal Bank, single-tenant building. Because of security, they needed a single-tenant building. It has exclusive use of 434 parking stalls, a better location for office space in southwest Winnipeg, and they recently renewed at $12. But that's post-reference.
Okay.
Right.
So then 1303 Jefferson, Lucky Supermarket, and that's in the top half of page 12 in terms of photos.
That's one of the Sobeys that closed. There were several, and it was relet with the landlord putting some dollars towards their space at $9 a square foot. It's on grade, there you have it, parking in front.
$1910 Pembina,
What's that?
and that's an April 1, 2016 lease for the supermarket?
Yes.
Lucky Supermarket.
Yes, $9 at the reference date.
And then 1910 Pembina, that's the photo in the lower half of page 12.
Yes, that's the renewal rate on a power center. That's about 180,000 feet, so it doesn't have to be any bigger to be a power center. At $15, they had just renovated their space, and $15. On grade, they have loading in the back, grade and dock, and of course, in the front, they have parking.
Okay. The next one, 825 Sherbrooke, and that's the photo in the top half of page 13.
Right. Example of office space, medical, it's right across from a teaching hospital. It has parking, it's $11 a square foot.
And picked primarily, I gather, because of the size.
Because of the size and the use of 24/7.
All right, 970 Nairn, picture in the lower half of page 13.
Yes.
So that's Value Village.
Value Village, on grade, at a light, parking all around it, that's $10 a square foot.
And then 2305 McPhillips, top half of page 14.
Attached to a regional mall, ample parking, on grade, they can display all their stuff outside, and it's $12 a foot.
And this is part of the Garden City Shopping Center at
Yes, it-
Leland McPhillips.
Yes, it is.
And then 965 Henderson, that's a Sobeys location.
Yes. That was built to suit Sobeys. There's a liquor store there and the Royal Bank and other things on Henderson Highway, which is a tough street to find space on, and it is $11 a square foot. And the size is similar, 42,588. So in that size, that's the rent that people pay.
Okay. And then the next comparable, 600-50 Sage Creek, and that's on page 15. And that's the top half, sorry, page 15, yes, the top half. So that's a newly constructed,
Newly constructed for Sobeys. A lot went into infrastructure for Sobeys coolers and cases. We did the deal, $14 a square foot. And the size, what's that? 11? No.
Sorry.
What's that? It's a typo? And 1500 Dakota is a Sobeys as well. It's in the community of South St. Vital. And that lease is $12. It's on grade. It's $12. That's what people pay.
so in selecting this group of comparables, a number of them, the top half, I'll call them, are in the general area of the subject property. The lower half of them are more dispersed around the city. What were you looking for in terms of comparability?
Size, I couldn't, obviously nothing's comparable, nothing's gonna be on the second floor. National retailers, or regional retailers, and to show around the time of the reference year, because everything is post-reference year, what they actually paid.
Okay. Now, what I'd like to do, Mr. Schindlerman, is maybe just jump ahead into the rebuttal brief, and I'd like to talk about the assessor's comparables.
Yes, okay. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so if you go to page 1 of your rebuttal brief, that is a reproduction of the assessor's list of comparables, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So now we go to page 2 and following, and we're gonna have photos of each of those comparables with some comments, correct?
Yes.
All right, so this is 1,000 St. James Ashley's. And you both use that as a comparable. But tell me please your comments in relation to this.
It's on St. James, across the street, if that is important. It's 30% smaller than the smallest space at the subject. It's on grade, you can load furniture in, you can load furniture out. That's a comparable, and it's on a corner.
All right. Then 810 St. James Street, the Best Buy.
Yes.
So what do you think of the use of this comparable?
Well, it's smaller, it was purpose-built, we did the deal. It was consolidation of the Future Shop into the Best Buy, because Best Buy was the buyer, and Future Shop was originally the seller, but they opened under the same ownership. Big box landscaping was strong. They put 2 stores in. They quickly realized that they could only support 1. It's a standard loading and unloading and parking, and it was built purposely for them.
And in terms of comparability to the subject property, what would you say?
Only better. Better exposure, on grade, only better. And they were merging the sales of Future Shop into this location as well.
690
They wouldn't go into this building.
into the subject property?
Yes,
And why wouldn't they go in?
because it was on the 2nd floor and the spaces were too deep, vastly too deep. They didn't want to share loading with somebody else, security. And they didn't like the parking below because of the crime. And that's a big concern for an American retailer.
So what do you mean by crime? Can you explain that, please?
We have security, we have crime there every week, day, often. They can hide underground and do their business underground, and we have to provide security to chase them out. But sometimes they're hard to chase out, and vandalism that goes along with that. So it's certainly not an asset.
Okay. Page 4, 695 Empress.
Yes. Custom built, more space than they need, because they were at the time competing with Indigo, and they wanted to make this a statement. When the lease was over, Chapters remained at a lower rent than this.
Okay.
And they wouldn't go into the space, because Cadillac Fairview has a relationship with them, but they wouldn't go on the 2nd floor into such a deep space.
Okay. 947 St. James, the assessors identified that was Staples. And as you've noted, the rent went down from 1673 to
Right.
1579.
Right. We represent Staples in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Western Ontario. This was a short-term renewal. It did go down in rent, and they were just biding their time until they could relocate, and which they did into part of the Sears box.
Okay. So, page 6, the Marshall space.
Yeah.
So what do you have to say about that?
Well, it's a third smaller, and they don't go on the 2nd floor. And this was a case of the landlord, I did the deal, building their space completely, even paying $40,000 for their designer. Everything. A turnkey space. They moved in some fixtures and stock and sold their merchandise. And it's a third smaller.
And is it unusual that a tenant receives turnkey space?
Not when there's some desperation on the part of the landlord. That's what they needed to take that space. American retailers and now Canadian retailers are demanding more and more of landlords.
But just so we're clear, for the benefit of the panel, the rent being paid for this space, you're indicating included the landlord at the landlord's expense, completing everything necessary so that the tenant could move its inventory in and open.
That's right. And there was no other spaces available in the area. And Cadillac Fairview, with their ownership of it, had some leverage. So everything is not a shell space location, and it doesn't have the depth of the Target box. So they wouldn't get all of that frontage for the same square footage.
Okay. So then, page 7, 1450 Ellis, that was the Sears home store that we've talked about at the corner of Ellis and St. James. Do you consider it to be a better comparable than the subject?
Yes, in all ways. First of all, it's on the corner, there's signage on both sides. Parking is on grade and out right on the corner. There's co-tenancy with food. And we were able to subdivide it by this, because it was on grade and provided the loading, and we released it to Staples, who thought it was a much better location than what they had before. A higher ceiling.
So this is the second time he's presenting post-reference information on my rebuttal. Any of the pictures taken post-reference, you can use Google Street View to take historical pictures. I'm talking about the Sears Canada rent, not the Staples and Giant Tiger.
No, we're not talking about the Giant
He
Tiger.
is just presenting that right now.
No, I'm not. I never mentioned the word giant tiger.
You said beside food, your picture shows the Giant Tiger in the,
It's beside the food next door, Starbucks, Mongo's,
all that
Lay's
stuff is a
Pizza.
post-reference.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
No, it's not. No, I did those deals. No, they're not.
They're post-2016
No,
deals.
they're not.
Well, just wait.
Similar to the 947 St. James, you got Spirit of Halloween in here.
No, I didn't say the Spirit of Halloween.
Okay, so Mr. Taylor, you're saying that the pictures reflect post-reference physical,
And the information he's providing.
possibly the pictures are post-reference.
Right.
I did go back.
All we're trying to do is compare it to the comparables the assessor used, and that's why we're talking about Sears. Yes, I agree, the picture came later because Sears left.
I think Mr. Taylor is saying that some of the pictures are post-reference.
I don't dispute that. But we're not using the post-reference tendencies, although I will observe, Mr. Chairman, in the spirit of what Mr. Taylor is saying, that the brochure in his brief is clearly post-reference.
Yes, and he stated that.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
so
so-
let's keep going then. Page 8, 710 St. James, one of the assessor's comparables. And how would you compare that to the subject?
Again, it's on grade, it's across from Polo Park. The loading is typical, the signage is typical, the ceiling height is typical. It has a lot of frontage on St. James Street, and that's all I can say about that, correct?
All right, yes, that's all you can say. Okay, then page 9, the last of the comparables, 600 Empress, the Bed Bath and Beyond space. And again, in terms of it being turnkey space, explain what happened there.
Right. Bed Bath & Beyond was first to market. Second floor location was not an option. They needed a fair amount of frontage for their prototypical store. And we built it out for them to get them in the space. They're in the Western Financial Building.
Okay, so, let's move on. I want to address with you vacancy. The assessors used 2%.
Right.
In your opinion, is 2% realistic for the retail marketplace at April 1 of 2016?
It is a no, it is so out there. Vacancy for typical retail, on grade, not so deep, proper loading, 2% would be ridiculous for that. For the subject, which is still 35% vacant, and has a tenant that doesn't pay rent. That's even more ridiculous.
So if you would look at page 12 of the rebuttal brief. This is the cover page for the city's 2018 income producing manual. And then the next page is page 13, both of the brief and from the manual. It's got the vacancies listed for the various types of properties. And in the top section of the document, we can see Polo Park Shopping Center and St. Vital Shopping Center listed at 2%. Do you think this property is comparable in terms of its demand in the marketplace by tenants, such as to warrant a 2% vacancy?
Not in any way, in my professional opinion.
If we can come back to your main brief, please.
Yes.
Page 16. So this is where we discuss vacancy in greater detail. So you talk about retail warehouse at the bottom of the page. And you talk about the Johnson report showing an increase in vacancy for retail generally and power centers specifically, noting that retail was 5.8% at the top of page 17 as of December 1 of 15. But then you go on the balance of this page to discuss a variety of occurrences in the retail marketplace with bankruptcies and closures of various stores. And again, just briefly, at the bottom of the page, you've got a list of various tenants. Can you explain to the board what happened with those various business operations?
This speaks to vacancy, obviously, in box stores. Cap rate, as to what an investor would pay for a box store, that could be precarious. 875 St. James is the subject property, is 100% vacant. On Regent Avenue, it was on grade. They were able to subdivide the space, and it's a regional mall, so they had options. Grant Avenue, they had options.
And we've seen the photos of the Canadian Tire at Grant.
Right.
Okay.
Lakewood, they were able to give it to Walmart, the lease, because it was on grade and had the floor load capacity, and they could just move in, and they opened. The Future Shop on St. James Station, that was across the street, closed. The Leela Future Shop closed, and 1570 Regent closed. They were all 100% vacant, by the way, not two. Safeway, we missed one closure in the Maples. We had an example of it, the Lucky Supermarket. These are all the Safeways that closed. Leela, Ness, Henderson, Ellison Wall, and Main and Lexington. 100% vacant. Office Depot closed, and again, we did we did all these deals. 1845 Pembina, it stayed vacant for years and years until we put in part of it Long and McQuaid. They had a need. All of them were on grade, and 1845 Pembina, for example, could be subdivided. So the golf school or whatever is a separate space now. And Ness was subdivided. Dollarama we put in there, a brewery. There's other tenants, I can't think of who.
But before, and let's not talk about what went in there subsequently.
Okay.
These are examples of business operations in multi-locations in big box format that all closed, leading up to April 1 of 16, correct?
Right.
Okay. Let's just come back to the prior page for a moment. The first full paragraph starts the main contributor to this increase in vacancy, and then down towards the bottom of that paragraph, you see there's a link in blue to a Globe and Mail article, which is about Sears and what Sears was reporting in terms of footprint rationalization efforts. And so what was this about?
This was what every investor would see who's going into the market and choosing a cap rate and choosing a vacancy rate and choosing a market rent, what they will underwrite a tenants at, and shows that they were cost cutting, shows that they were taking their stores that weren't doing the sales per square foot and planning to close them. The only reason they didn't close some sooner is they owned them. And that's why they closed later.
So in the context of the 2% vacancy utilized by the assessor,
Yes.
do you consider that reasonable in light of the activity that was occurring in the marketplace as reflected at pages 16, 17, and 18 of your brief?
No, I do not. The bay depths when we subdivided, the second, no way. So,
And
and look at all the space that's available on grade in the area.
all right, let's just turn the pages of the brief for a moment. So, starting at page 20, we've got a series of photos of the property. And so, for example, on page 20 and page 21, we see the stairways that are associated with this property.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have to leave the stairwells open for egress because it's multi-tenant. And the drug dealers go in there and they burst the pipes by keeping the doors open. So there's an example of the fact that we take water out of there all the time.
Okay. Page 22 is the roof.
Right.
And we'll come in a moment to some roof reports, but that's a reflection of the physical condition which indicated there were deficiencies in the roof.
They never got an occupancy permit.
And then page 23, page 24, that's on to page 25, that's some of the work being done. Let's then come please to page 25, and here's where you speak about capitalization. We've heard the assessor acknowledge that 6.5% is a rate that would need to be adjusted. He's not volunteered a rate. How would you approach a capitalization rate for this property?
Well, it's hard not to put yourself into the framework. We were more optimistic at that time, probably 8 to 10%. In hindsight, that wouldn't have been well. Now, he said that they're a typical warehouse building because they keep, they're able to move in inventory, which none of these tenants do. All their inventory is on the floor. There isn't a back room on any of them. So, and that was the explanation for warehouse. They could move people. These are not that. I add at least 1% premium for the second floor design. Inadequate floor load. I tried to build a configuration and life safety so we don't get, we build up from the cap rate, or these are called adjustments, I guess. Poor constructed building. And I added 0.5% of risk associated with the larger big box stores of what was known at the time. I came to 8%. I thought it was defendable. Certainly the Kenniston Boulevard is now number 1 in a first choice for retailers. And with the outlet collection and the surrounding area, Seasons it's actually called, and I choose 8%, my expert opinion, at a minimum for this property.
Look at page 27 of your brief. This is a reproduction of the assessor's chart for cap rates
Yes.
that we've spoken about earlier. In the middle section of the table is the retail. The assessor says that the retail warehouse category is nowhere to be found on this chart. But let me ask you about power center, and in your mind, what is a power center, and is this building similar to a power center?
Other than the fact it isn't on grade, which is a big point, this is designed to be a power center. It's designed with 3 tenants, category dominant size, a lot of depth in the spaces. It's closest to a power center. I assume that they put that chart in because it was
All right.
what they have.
So let me take us back to the rebuttal brief for a moment.
Page 15.
So at page 10, you're making some general comments about the assessor's comparables,
Right.
indicating what the average rent was, what the median is, what the weighted average is, and then you're making adjustments to that. And can you take us through that, please?
Yes. The properties, an analysis of their lease rates, because I can only talk about what they presented. The average rent is $16.77. The weighted average rent is $16.67 for all smaller spaces. They're comparable not, because they're not on grade. We would need a 20% reduction for a cost to cure, a cost to fix the structural floor load, and to address the difference between main floor properties with standard parking and loading, with on grade, which is compared to the subject property. The security and cost of operating a parking lot would be taken off of that. So we chose a 20% reduction just for those things and came to $13.42. That would be an average, using that adjustment, of $13.42, not 17 and change, as used by the department. The subject, the department only seems to have the information in a manner to lead us to above market rents. So where they have revenue and expense questionnaire, I assume on 600 Ellis, they didn't notice, Empress, they didn't notice there was a Western Financial on the second floor that would be comparable to the second floor that we have. This one has underground parking as well. And why they couldn't find it, it was a turnkey for Western Financial, it was a tender, a proposal call, a turnkey at $14.75 for 73,000 feet with underground parking. Now, that isn't covered parking, open to the elements and open to everybody. That's their own underground parking. $14.75, but it wasn't used. And it's curious, I guess, because you can see it from the site. It's comparable.
And you would point out that the space was turnkey, so
Yes.
again, the total improvements for the tenant are being built by the landlord, and if you took that out, the rent would be lower.
The rent would be lower, maybe $11, but also the shape of the space allowed there to be windows all around for them, and to have their own elevator into the space.
Okay.
So a comparable, I would have to adjust downward.
All right, so let's jump ahead, please, to page 16.
Of the rebuttal.
Of the rebuttal, yes, I'm sorry, thank you.
Getting there, yep.
So what this does is this recalculates the value that you're putting forth for the subject property,
Yes,
and it fixes the rent at $12 a square foot for all of the spaces in the building.
yes,
It utilizes a 25% vacancy,
yes,
an $8 shortfall,
yes,
and an 8% cap rate.
yes,
And that brings the value to $12,052,000.
yes,
Go to the next page, please. This was the original assessment as put forward for 2018, correct?
yes, it was,
And it used a 25% vacancy.
yes. Of course it was, yes,
And then page 18 is the recommendation made by the assessor for the original 2018, reducing it to $16,862,000, rent at $12.50, and continuing to use a 25% vacancy.
yes,
And then page 19 is the decision of this board on the original 2018 appeal, setting the value at $10,447,000.
yes,
And then page 20 is the calculation that was presented originally to the Board of Revision, bringing the value to $10,447,000.
that's right,
And the difference between what you're presenting today and what was presented on the original assessment is essentially the rent for what is now a multi-tenant building is $12 as opposed to $10.
yes,
The other elements, the other variables, the vacancy, and the cap rate are the same. The shortfall has been increased because of the multi-tenant nature of the building.
right. And you can't rent all the space when you multi-tenant, you put shared loading docks and shared fire escapes and et cetera.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Or shall we say that's your presentation?
That's his presentation.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Newman?
Not in terms of the questioning, we will have submissions at the end, but that's it in terms of the presentation on the evidence. We're open to questions.
Okay.
Nothing from Justin or Diane?
Nope.
No? Okay.
So no submissions. Okay, you presented Mr. Schindelman's presentation.
That's it.
Are you presenting on the valuation or
No.
is the, no, that's it.
That's it.
Okay,
That is our evidence.
That is your evidence, okay.
Subject only to questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Taylor, any questions?
I guess I'll go backwards from, okay, so page 10, your rebuttal.
Well, just, let me get a chance
Yeah.
to. I have it,
You're there?
yeah.
Okay, so Western Financial,
Yeah,
does it have similar loading to the subject property?
yes, it has loading in the back.
Loading in the back? And is there elevators to get stock up to the second floor?
To get stock up to the second floor? No, there isn't.
No. So,
You get people up to the second floor, there is.
yeah, exactly. You were asking here, or accusing, saying that why we didn't use this, or I didn't use this as a comparable.
Yes.
Because it's not the same as the subject, I don't see it being comparable.
None of them are the same as the subject.
I'm just clarifying. You asked why I didn't use it, and I'm
Okay.
saying I didn't use it because you can't
Because it's
load
not
materials up
It
into the
can't
second.
load materials, okay.
Yeah, it's just second floor office
Yeah.
space. What else do I have for questions here? Oh, I had a question about, you said we did the deal on a lot of your comparables and mine, so I just want you to go through both lists and clarify which ones you did the rest for.
Now, which page are you on?
Well, it can either be your page 1 of your rebuttal and page 7 of your presentation.
Page 1. 1,000 St. James, 810 St. James, 695 Ellis, third one, Empress. The fourth one, the fifth one, the sixth one, the seventh one, the eighth one, I did them all.
Did all mine, and on yours, which ones did you do?
Where's mine?
Yours are page 7 of your original submission.
I did the first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one. I was intimately involved in the sixth one with Canadian Tire. I was involved in the seventh one, the eighth one, not the ninth one, the 10th one, the 11th one, the 12th one. Had some involvement in the 14th one, and that's all.
Okay, so you're involved in a lot of these comparables on both sides.
Yes, that's what we do.
Okay, and so what do you do also entails repurposing space. You mentioned turnkey a bunch of times too.
That's not repurposing. Turnkey is completely separate.
I understand that, yeah. Repurposing space. Like you mentioned, even here in your comparables, you have Cabela's in that $1,300. They moved out and you moved in Bianca Moore's.
Yes.
Like what you did with the subject property.
We-
Target moved out, you're repurposing it.
No,
New
no, it's not
tenants.
at all the same. The warehouse and the office of Cabela's in $1,300 was subdivided off because Bianca Amore didn't need it. And we were able to access it and load it on grade.
Lots of your comparables here, like you've negotiated, former Zellers, former Targets, repurposed space.
No, where?
All I'm saying is you're an expert seemingly on all these, or you're qualifying yourself as an expert.
I did the deals.
You did all the deals where someone moved out and somebody else moved in, or there's been corporate changes.
No, I think, oh no, most of them not. The furniture store with the brick was a renewal. Bianca and Moore, they used the space as is. The Cabela's was the S.I. Robinson. Ashley Furniture just took it over as is. The Grant Park Target was renovated. It was 6 1/4. And there was work done to the Canadian Tire. But they were on grade, they were able to put the automotive in, not at all comparable from that perspective. Royal Bank, that was a turnkey, 3 layers of data cabling.
Yeah, I get that. My point was just that there was somebody else in the space before, and you negotiated a
No.
new deal with somebody new in it.
No,
I think
No.
the issue Mr. Schindelman is taking issue with is some of these were renewals, and in his mind, therefore, that's not a repurposing.
Okay,
I think that's where you're getting some resistance from him.
okay. All I'm just trying to say is someone was in the space, they weren't the original tenant back when the building was built, correct?
well, the Sobeys were, the brick, it was a successor to Value, United Furniture. There's,
And that brick one, they bought the building at the same time as that lease was negotiated, correct?
no, somebody else owns it, Min owns it.
When the deal was done, though, it was United Furniture dealing with United Furniture.
Yeah, exactly. And then the Sage Creek property, that's a land lease, correct?
Sage Creek, no, that's the Sobeys.
Yeah. But the rent you have listed here in the area is all the land area for the Sobeys.
No, it's the size of the store.
Okay.
38,000 feet, the size of the store.
What the owners provided us with, the department, is that it's a land lease, not,
It's a land lease with a tenant improvement allowance. So they built it. That's the only difference.
okay. And location-wise, you really only have the 4 in the St. James kind of region?
The brick at $10, Bianca more $8, Cabela's $7, Ashley $12. Those are the only ones that are in the immediate area.
And age-wise, are there any as new as the subject property aside from the Sage Creek land lease?
Lucky Supermarket. No, this disaster is newer.
Okay. And you mentioned before that the Target didn't have occupancy, but do the current tenants have occupancy for their space?
2 of them do. Are they on temp still?
So, yeah, I mean, is that existing physical or is that current economic rate?
Well, they're not-
I mean,
Okay, well,
physically do
I'll
they
answer-
have-
I'll answer the question. Winners doesn't pay any rent. I'll answer your question. They don't pay rent until it's fully
My
leased.
question wasn't about the rent, is if they have occupancy permits.
I don't know.
And that's a fiscal question.
I don't
It's not
know.
economic.
I don't know.
It's not about the rent.
I don't know. Possibly an interim.
That's it for my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Boss, any questions?
Yes. At present, there's 40-some thousand square feet vacant.
Yes.
Is that on the first and second floor, or is it
No,
all on the second?
All on the second floor.
All on the second. Is there anything occupied on the second floor?
Yes,
Parked?
yes. It's supposed to reference, am I allowed to tell you? The Winners Home Sense doesn't pay rent. They're in there, they don't pay, they're not required to pay rent. The only tenant in there and paying rent is 24/7 in touch.
And they're all on the main floor?
Second floor, all on the second
They're on
floor.
the second floor.
Yes.
Well, they've got a lobby, you know, if you think of the building, the old Target lobby they use as like.
They don't pay rent
entrance.
on it.
Yeah, and then they've got the bulk of their space is second floor.
I
It's
think,
like you need a way to get into the building, right?
So who, I'm getting confused as to the tenant on the second floor, the vacancy on the second floor.
all
All
of
the
the tenants are on the
vacancies.
second floor and all the vacancies on the second floor.
What's on
Main floor is the covered park.
Covered parking.
Oh,
The main floor is 2 lobbies, 1 private for the call center, 1 for Winners and Winners and Home
okay,
Sense.
yes. Now I understand. Did Target consult with you before they put this building up?
Yes?
Because it seems like they put up a building that doesn't work properly and you have so much experience.
We went down to Minneapolis, did you go?
I was
We went down to Minneapolis, 3 of us, 5 of us, Cadillac Fairview and 2 people, and 3 people from our office. We told them that they wouldn't listen to us on drilling holes for the condensation in the signs, in the sign boxes. We said we drill holes here, because the light, they wouldn't drill holes in the wayfinding signs. They knew everything, they knew nothing. You can see the roof they put on. You can see that they didn't put any rebar in the parking structure.
They have a cold climate in Minnesota as well.
And Grand Forks and,
Okay.
we spent a whole day with their people.
That's all my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Maurice?
I just had one. On your shortfall, the city's at $550 or $8. I know you've tried to explain that on page 19 of your brief. But could you elaborate on that a little more?
I'll just have to get these. Yes, you can answer.
So a typical retail building on the main floor has, lighting, heating, air conditioning, those sort of expenses. This has all of those expenses, which I guess add up to around $550. But then we add, 3 elevators, we add an escalator, we add common area, we add stairwells and hallways for egress and security. So we add all that stuff to a normal $550 per square foot, and that brings up the cost. There's just more costs. So from $550, we add $250 to get to $850, because there is that much more cost to operate this building.
It doesn't,
And the biggest one is security, right? Because the way that the city treats the enclosed, or the covered parking is as if it's enclosed. So we have to have, heated fire exits that have to be accessible to anyone all throughout the base of the building. And so what that leads us to is having vagrants that live in them. And so we've got to keep them clear, and instead of having people there effectively living in our building, we've got to monitor that security. And then beyond that, we've got kids that skateboard and vandalize because it's not visible inside. And so even though that's not rentable area, right, the parking's not, it creates a huge amount of cost for us in terms of this versus a normal at-grade building.
so that's where you justify the $250 over and above, because the city, I'm sure, in their $550, well, I'm sure, never sure of anything, but in the $550, I would assume allow for elevators and different things like that. So,
Not in this category,
no,
not in this category.
you don't?
They're all at grade.
There's no,
Okay.
RWC's all at grade.
Okay, so that's where your argument is, that where the $250 sort of adds to the $550.
right, and like Justin said, we have a security contract. We have security people that come and check the building constantly. We have to.
Okay, that's all my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, I will start with the rebuttal, page 16, and the original, call it the presentation, page 6.
So,
We're looking at 2 different estimates of value here, one at $12,052,000, one at $16,939,000. Are we, I'll wait till you get to, right? Right, yeah. Okay, so, are we ignoring page 6 of the original report?
The simple answer is yes,
Yes, okay,
but I want to explain to you why.
okay.
Okay, because I think what happened when this brief was originally prepared, there was some confusion about the concept of physical condition today, post-reference information, and you can see the way page 6 was laid out. It was referencing the tenants that came along after the reference date. And so that's what was happening here. There was some confusion between taking into account the post-reference status and not, and that's why it was reformatted and recalculated, as you see in the rebuttal brief.
Okay, so we will
Ignore
remove
it.
this?
Yes.
All right,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. So physically, you've got two areas occupied. The square footage on the calculations on square footage between the assessor, you've actually got more square footage than the assessor does. Not much more, basically the same. So let's deal with the parking. There's covered, we'll call it covered parking, main level, ground level.
Yes.
What is the ratio of surface outside parking to available surface outside parking to covered parking for this building?
While they're calculating it, all the parking covered and out front is what's needed for bylaw, parking ratio. So
Okay.
it's not extra that's enclosed.
I know, but rightly or wrongly, it's
Okay.
being implied that there's only covered parking that
No.
is a negative, but there is outdoor parking.
There's some outdoor parking.
Okay, so that's on the east side towards Polo Park. There's some lots there, that handicap.
South,
South
south,
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 okay.
no
No,
east.
of that picture
Yeah.
where you put the box or.
It would be about 2 to 1, but I don't think we have the numbers.
And those pad sites, is that currently parking on the east side of the?
No,
No,
they're,
okay.
what those are, in post-reference that they put in, we put everything, we throw the kitchen sink at it for what's available. Somebody says, I'll choose this site, but you can't build on the others. You have to provide parking. So you can see by that drawing that would be no parking at all for the, where is that?
Page 6 of the assessment.
Page 6 of the assessor's brief. No, where's the one where he shows the brochure?
Yeah, no, that's what I mean.
uh,
Page 6 of the assessment.
No, he's talking about at the end.
I'm talking about on page 6, we went
No,
through this.
that's not it.
Page 19.
Page
So-
19. Okay, so page 19, post-reference stuff. Page 19, if you just have a look at page 19, where would you park if you built all those buildings? If you built a hotel?
No, that's not my question. We're talking with the current physical
Okay,
situation of the building that's under appeal.
yes,
Okay, and my question earlier was, I asked if these lots here belong to this
yes,
owner.
yes, they do.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
They're required,
And it looks to me like there's parking on there.
yes,
And
yes,
it's
there is.
outdoor parking.
Yes.
Outdoor,
So, and underneath the building, we've got, let's say, 70% is parking space.
About that.
Outside of the footprint of the actual two-story building.
that's right.
So, so there is surface parking. And
Yes.
are these lots, are these the pad site developments?
No,
They are.
the pad site development is only one, because the.
But it's not on the subject property.
No, it is, so calling it a pad site is probably a little confusing. The parking that you see here in the building, including where the PF Chang's is gonna go, it's all one lot. So even though we call them pad sites, because you build a building pad there, but there's only 2 lots here. The subject property, which is that parking, and the building. And the PF Chang's is a whole that would be on the southeast parking area. Like,
I guess my question is there, should there be some value assigned to the vacant land in
No.
addition to the income of the property?
I understand where you're going. So let's go back for just a moment to the first page of the assessor's brief. Because what you're really asking about is a land to building ratio, and what you're really asking about is there enough parking for what's going on here such that there is excess land?
Well, that wasn't where I was going, but, yeah, but, okay, yeah, I would agree with
And the simple answer is, when you go back to page 6, when you drew that line around the box, so you've got the building, south, you've got a roadway right in front of the building. South of that roadway, you see the area that's been developed as parking, and that's visible from the photo. That area, that asphalted area with parking upon it is part of this roll.
Yes.
And I think you can ask Mr. Schindelman, but I think he will tell you that that parking is necessary for the occupancy of the
Okay,
building.
for the bylaw
Yes.
requirement, okay.
And beyond that,
Okay.
we just got a variance to build additional parking, not on this title, for that PF change, because we need it.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, okay, all right. So, okay, let's see. When you were going through your comparisons, am I in the rebuttal here, or?
Okay, rebuttal?
Yeah, page 6
Page 6.
of the rebuttal, you made a comment about Marshall's, the 600 Empress Street,
Yes.
and I think we established that Marshalls and Winners are under TJX Corporation.
Yes.
So what would the comment be about this tenant would not consider a second floor location when the company did take your second floor location under the Winners?
Yeah, well, Marshall's was originally a different company with different management.
Okay.
The reason TJX bought the company was, as told to me by the chairman of TJX, somebody phones TJX, I got 100,000 pair of brown pants. How much will you give me for them? $1. Then they phone Marshalls. How much will you give me for them? $1.50. So they were fighting for inventory. So the Marshalls was, we tried to put them on the second floor in Polo Park. They wouldn't take second floor space. They wanted their own entrance for security because they consider themselves a little higher end than Winners. Whether that's true or not, somebody else would have to tell me.
And Marshall's had the opportunity, since they weren't already in the trade area, to be pickier. Whereas Winners really had to move as soon as those CRUs got built in front of them on Empress.
They
all
took
their-
away the parking.
All their visibility and parking was taken by the Cadoba, I don't know if you know the mall where Winners used to be. It's got Yisk, it's got, what used to be
Empress.
Footy Goodies
Empress.
on Empress, sorry.
Yeah.
And so Winners realized that their current location was compromised and had to find somewhere else. So they were willing to compromise when, even though it's the same company, Marshalls could be pickier because they weren't already there. They didn't need it.
Yeah, but I guess, would it be fair to say that Marshalls and Winners feed off each other being so close?
No. Not any more than any other retailer.
Because when I've gone into any of those stores, they're full all the time.
Yep.
Either of them, both of them.
But they're not necessarily cross-shopping.
Okay, well, all right.
I mean, they cross-shop with Canadian Tire too, and all different.
Yeah, okay. Okay, let's go to the rebuttal, page 10, please. In the middle of the page, you say to use, we use the average of incorrect examples. Rent would be $13.42. So, and then you go on your workup and use $12 a square foot. Am I missing
No.
something here?
No,
Okay.
that's his comparables, not mine.
Okay.
His came out to
His came out to
1342,
42.
but he used 17.
He used a model,
Well, you actually use 1436 on average,
Okay.
blended, but,
blended.
That's the point here, is
yeah,
that
okay.
the department's comparables.
So in your opinion, the department's comparables averaged out at 1342, not 14, not the assessed value they
Right.
used at 1436. Okay, okay. So that wasn't what you were projecting you should use for the rent?
No,
Correct.
no.
Okay. Okay. Now, and I know it's post-reference, but you stated that currently Winners isn't paying rent. What is the asking lease rate for the vacant area? You seem to, the assessor had assessed the vacant area.
That's a good question.
No, I'll ask you one thing first. The assessor's using $10 a square foot for the leasable vacant area. You seem to be using, I believe it's 12?
Mhm.
So you're actually higher than the assessor.
Right.
You've used a rate $12 across the board, okay. What are you asking for that vacant?
12.
You are asking 12, okay.
We offered it to London Drugs at 12, Mountain Equipment Co-op, the furniture store that's by.
Oh, sorry,
No,
EQ3.
EQ3, the sporting goods store, Sport Check,
Oh, that's okay, okay, you're asking $12, yeah, thank you. And for the call center, what is the lease rate right now?
I don't have it.
It's 14.
$14 a square foot, okay.
Not 1762.
Well, the assessor's actually using 1436 blended.
1436.
Yeah, and you're asking, you're getting 14, okay.
Right.
Okay, all right.
The space that's left is in the middle. We can't offer any windows in the middle. They,
So yeah, even though we're using that 12, kind of for easy calculation, we really have given away the two best. Like, the end cap still means
Yeah,
something.
so where would the access to the vacant space be? Accessed by the Marshall's, or pardon me, Winners side, or the
they have to go through
24/7?
Winter side,
Yeah,
because
okay,
it's security.
okay, yeah.
And
Because
then
24/7 is private, basically private entrance, private office space.
We had to get permission to take your child to work day to go in there and view the space. And we weren't allowed to take pictures.
Okay. And regarding the Marshalls, rent at $20,
Yes,
I know it's smaller,
much smaller.
but same company, same neighborhood. Do you think that a reduction of $8 a square foot
Yes.
in estimated market value is
Yes,
fair?
well, the space is big, it's on the second floor. They didn't get it built out for them, so we can't compare the 20 to any number. We paid for their designer,
Now, how about the call
after they
center?
already, pardon?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We paid everything,
Okay, and how about the call center on Taylor at
Yes.
1650?
right? We renewed at 12.
Yeah, okay. Post reference?
Yeah, post-reference,
Okay, yeah, okay.
with three layers of data cabling. They're on a computer floor, a raised floor.
And when it's determined that Winners is gonna pay for the lease, if you lease out that third area, what lease rate will it be?
I don't
Will you
know.
settle on a lease rate on that?
It's more complicated than that, because there's percentage rent and things like that, so it's tied to their sales.
Okay. So
yeah.
they're currently paying all the expenses for that?
No, they don't pay the expenses.
They don't pay anything,
They don't
zero?
pay the expenses.
They-
So they're paying right now 2% of their gross sales.
Oh, wow, okay,
which
so they
works
are
out-
paying
which works
some.
out- But
No.
it doesn't even cover the property taxes.
It doesn't cover their taxes.
Okay, but they are paying something.
Something. They don't pay the operating costs,
Okay.
and they pay a portion of the taxes.
Okay.
That's it.
So your market estimation is approximately $12 million.
Yes.
Since we've got the owner sitting here, would you be willing to sell it?
Yes.
For $12 million?
Yes.
You would,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Okay,
And I'd like to sell it. $12 million. I'd
Okay.
like quick closing.
well, I was gonna go into the cap rate, but I think we'll just leave it where it is. Okay, thank you very much. That's all my questions. Mr. Taylor, requirement for summary for 2018.
No, it's okay.
Okay. And-
I'm gonna do one summary for both years.
Yeah.
Because my points will be the same.
Okay,
So I think probably we should save it But I think you're gonna ask the question, you're gonna hear that the evidence for 19 is the same from both parties.
Yeah, but except because it's a separate appeal,
Yeah.
we're gonna start it, we're gonna do a quick
Okay.
summary of the, because it is a separate appeal.
Fair enough.
And then we'll, first of all, ask, does anybody need a break before we start 2019?
Well, I'll have to feed my meter, it depends how long we're gonna be on.
Okay.
The evidence will be identical, no? It'll just be the formality of reading
Okay,
it in.
okay, so that concludes, no requirement for summary, because we're gonna do it in 2019. That concludes the 2018 appeal, realty appeal for 875 St. James Street. Next appeal is for same address, 875 St. James Street, for 2019 realty assessment appeal, file number 19-6. And it was because of a supplementary assessment issued in late 2018, we've got this 2019 appeal. And Mr. Taylor, if you'd like to just present a quick overview of the subject property, roll number and everything, and state how you'd like the information presented for 2018 should be handled for 2019, please.
Sure. So roll number is 13096195800, 875 St. James Street. Again, went through all this, but assessed value of $31,707,000 today. And then I'm just going to quickly jump to page 3, which has 3 tenancies. Because of the addition would be split into 3 commercial rental units, 1 override rent, 2 mile-driven rents, vacancy of 2%, shortfall of $8, and, $550, and a capitalization rate of 6.5%, so that $31,707.
Thank you. I would assume no questions of the assessor or carry forward.
Carry forward all my questions from the 18 appeal.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Taylor, any requirement for a summary for 2019?
No, that's okay.
Okay, Mr.
I want to do one summary for both years.
Okay, thank you.
So, we all understand that the task of the assessor is to determine the value, April 1/16, willing buyer, willing seller. You see in the materials that this property's been before the board before. The building envelope was essentially $150,000, single tenant, all located up on the second level, 150,000 square feet, all located up on the second floor. At that time, page 17 of the rebuttal, the value was proposed at $22,979,000. Page 18 of the rebuttal, the recommendation was to reduce it to $16,862,000. And then ultimately it turned into $10,477,000. That's pages 19 and 20 of the rebuttal. All of that is there. They can't lease the space as a single occupant, so they subdivided into 3 units. The building envelope doesn't change, except for the addition of the vestibule to create access into the building. The leasable area doesn't increase. In fact, the leasable area has decreased because of the necessary fire exits for the multi-tenant. A supplementary is issued effective October 1 of 2018. You've heard me on the section 341 issue earlier. I'm not going to repeat that, simply to say we reserve our rights. So the question now becomes, what is this building? It's classified as a retail warehouse, purpose-built by Target. It's different from all the other Target stores in that it's on stilts, as we call it. It's at the second level. There's parking underneath. It's a unique concept in the retail world. As the assessor says, he can't point to another retail property like this where the retail is up at a second level only. Yes, we have retail and enclosed shopping malls, but we don't have it standalone. The building opens in the fall of 13. By April of 15, the building is closed because Target is insolvent. The building stays vacant, and it stays vacant beyond April 1 of 16, and it stays vacant until it's reconfigured and then becomes occupied subsequently, and that's of course what leads to the supplementary. The city, in recommending $16,862,000, recommended $12.50 a square foot, recommended a 25% vacancy because what the building was recognized. The question becomes ultimately, what will the willing buyer pay to the willing seller at the reference date? taking the building in its physical condition today. In other words, reconfigured so it now becomes a 3-tenant building. So the answer to that, I say to you, is found in looking at the marketplace at April 1 of 2016. And the marketplace at that point tells us that there are things happening. Big box retail has changed. Future shops have closed, a number of Safeway Sobeys have closed, Office Depots have closed, the writing is on the wall for Sears, Pet Cetera has closed, there's still some old Blockbuster video space that is sitting unleased. All of this is the marketplace of April 1 of 16. Now, into that marketplace, let's drop 500,000 square feet of Target space. That's now become vacant. 3 of those 4 Target stores are at grade. Therefore, they're much more amenable to subdivision and partition. What else is happening? Online retailing is taking off like crazy. In fact, you go into many stores today, and they'll say to you, you can order it online, because they don't have it in the store. That's what's happened to the retail world. And you've got additional competition happening in the southwest part of Winnipeg in the form of the IKEA site, but more importantly, the surrounding retail development in the ground, underway at that point, and going to add hundreds of thousands of square feet of retail. So what does the city do in response to the reconfiguration of the building? They triple the assessment from what the board did. They double the assessment, almost, from what the assessor recommended at the original 2018 appeal. And why? What has happened to the property? There's only one thing that has happened. What used to be 150,000 square feet, single tenant occupiable, has now become potentially 3 tenants occupiable. And as Mr. Schindelman says, the problem they have for that middle tenant is no windows. Because they've given away either end of the space. So on rent, you've heard us at some length. None of the comparable rents used by the assessor are second floor retail. I can't blame him for that, because as he acknowledges, there aren't any. But it does lead to a need to make adjustments. So the $17 rents are model driven, but the assessor who was doing this overrode the vacant space and put it in at $10. Why didn't the assessor override all of the spaces? Why just override the one? The best comparables we suggest to you are 1450 Ellis, the former Sears home store, corner of Ellis and St. James, lots of visibility, signage on both sides, $15 rent done at February 1 of 2015. Closest in size to the subject units, it's 47,000 square feet, so it is the closest in size to the subject units, and it is also the closest in time to the reference date. And for that reason, I say to you, it's the best starting point for the determination of rent. But even then, it's at grade, its loading is at grade, consumers go in and out at grade, they take their purchases in and out at grade, and the subject is different from that perspective. And so you need an adjustment. Next best comparable, we suggest 947 St. James, 40,000 square feet, rent at $15.79 a square foot, again, at grade, so adjustments are going to be necessary to take that into account. But those I suggest to you are the 2 best comparables. The other comparables, they become dated in the sense that they go back into 2013, they go back into 2012, they go back earlier into 2014, they go into 1999, they go into a different era in terms of what's happening in retailing, where the proliferation of vacancy through the closure of various business operations has not yet occurred. And so while the other comparables are all in the area, they are, I will suggest to you, in a different economic time before the onslaught of online retailing and the impact that that is having on the retail market generally. Two of them, the Bed Bath and Beyond and the Marshalls, they are turnkey leases where the tenants have absolutely everything given to them and paid for, and of course, that's reflected in the rent. You back that out of the rent, you're gonna see a very different rent number. Vacancy. Beyond our comprehension how vacancy can be set at 2%. How can our vacancy be the same as Polo Park and St. Vital shopping centers, the two best shopping centers, regional shopping centers in Winnipeg? Page 13 of the rebuttal is the assessor's manual that shows those vacancies at 2%. At April 1 of 2016, the entire building is vacant. Even if you drop the multi-tenant configuration into the footprint of the building at April 1 of 16, it's vacant. So now we have to assume and anticipate what would the market rent be, what would the occupancy be? And we're saying that the market rent should be set at $12. We're saying the vacancy should be set at 25%. We're saying that when you take into account what's going on in the big box market generally, in retailing generally, the writing is on the wall for retailing. You know, you drive around today and you look at shopping centers, and there's a lot of dark windows in those shopping centers. There's been a seismic shift in the real estate market, and it needs to be addressed. So we fixed the vacancy at 25%. It's the same vacancy the assessor used originally for 2018, and as part of the recommendation, we don't really see why that should change. Shortfall, assessor at $5.50, appellant at $8. Lighting is on 24 hours a day to light the covered parking lot. Elevators, escalators, security. The assessor shortfall is model-driven, $5.50 a square foot, buildings at grade. So it's not the proper set of comparables. We think $8 in light of the configuration of the building and the unique aspects of the covered parking and the need for security, we think that's a reasonable number. Capitalization rate, the model selected 6.5%. The assessor acknowledges that that needs to be adjusted. He's not ready to volunteer what that adjustment should be. That's okay, I understand, but he does acknowledge the risk associated with this property is different. It's not typical of a retail warehouse property. What you've got here is a second floor building that is not well received in the marketplace. You've got a risk of a full building being vacant of 150,000 square feet. You're layering on top of that what's going on in the marketplace in terms of retailing, the major shift in terms of the big box stores and many of them closing, the shift to southwest Winnipeg and the IKEA area. All of this suggests a capitalization rate that should be higher than the 6.5%. The assessor agrees it should be higher. We suggest to you it should be 8%. That's a reasonable number. That's what the board did on the original 2018. So at the end of the day, page 16 of our rebuttal gives you our calculation of $12,052,000. That's what we're asking for. And those are my submissions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Buss, any questions? Mr. Terry?
I'm fine.
Okay, my only question is to both parties, is there any pending municipal board on this property?
There are. It'll be an interesting question as to what happens with them in light of the supplementaries.
Okay, all right, that's my only question, and leave them both with us, and thank you very much, both parties, for appearing.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And that concludes our hearing.